What is up, y'all? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tough Takes with Blake. This is going to be a little bit different style show than what we normally do. It's going to be more engaging with all of you guys out there. So make sure if you're tuning in, make sure you're dropping where you're from. And we're going to be setting this up kind of like a Q&A. I'm going to be introducing my special guest here shortly, who is doing me a huge favor. He did not know this was going to be on video, so he's going to be bringing it to you guys. So make sure you guys have all your questions. And if he doesn't feel comfortable answering it due to legal purposes, he's just not going to answer them. So don't get offended if he doesn't answer your question. But before further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my friend, Preston Myers. You're muted, Preston. There we go. Can you hear me?
Hey, how are you?
What's up, Preston? How are you?
The connection was really bad. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. So a lot of people tuning in, a lot of people from all over Australia, different places, Texas, all over. Guys, bring your questions. And Preston, if while their questions are pouring in, if you want to tell them who you are and kind of what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, of course. I want to make sure, is the connection good? Because your intro was really bad connection. I didn't hear any of your intro.
Yeah, you're good.
Is there a delay? All right.
A little bit.
Good deal. So
but
guys,
we're good.
All right, good. So I am Preston Myers, known as previously working for Donald Trump. I started working for Donald Trump in 2012 and have a lot of really great experiences with him as it relates to personal experiences, also just overall great leadership experiences. Also known as a unique gay conservative. I'm a gay conservative who happens to also be a Christian. So it's always good to have a conversation around those things that make us different, and which I feel like should not ever separate us. Currently, I work in a strategy role. Unfortunately, not able to really talk in detail about who I work for or what I do, but I do still work in strategy and plan to further my career over the next 2 to 4 years, and eventually running for office in a state representative position for the state of India.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's short notice, and it was miscommunication on my part, so I apologize. But my question to you, and I know a lot of people are asking, is what direction do we move going on, like further from here? Like, what direction do you see, and what is the most important things that us as American citizens can be doing, and what do we need to be focusing our energy into moving forward?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what you should not be doing is getting discouraged. I think it's very easy right now, especially in these times, when you think about the COVID-19, and you think about the number of just negativity that's coming from all across the country, whether it's from a political perspective or a spiritual perspective. There is a tremendous amount of negativity. And so I think first and foremost, not getting discouraged, remembering that no matter what, we still live in the greatest country in this world. When you look at other countries, such as what took place in Australia yesterday, if you ever doubted that we do still live in the greatest country in the world, look at what Australia just went through yesterday. I think that is just one most recent example of what makes this country so great and allows us to realize that we do still live in a free country. So aside from don't get distracted, don't get discouraged, we need to be focusing 100% of our energy on 2020 elections, because that is going to be the only way that we will be able to win back the House and or hopefully both the Senate is through 2020 elections. And I always say, do not get stuck in the past. Do not stay focused on 2020, as I know we all are tempted to do at times, but we need to stay focused on redirecting our focus rather towards 2022 and some of the key states that we need to win in 2022 in order to take back through those elections, both the House and Senate.
Right.
So just stay positive.
And Preston, what do you think some of the biggest and crucial states during this time? Like, I know it's always the battlegrounds, typically Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia. We just faced that Senate runoff that happened last January in regards to the Senate, and that's why we're in the position that we're in. But we encourage people here at Primetime Patriots to get involved locally. And so, being someone who's in the political realm and really gets and understands like the severity of how important it is for us to get involved, what do you think, and what words do you have for people who are not really knowing what to do because they feel hopeless, they feel powerless. So how can we encourage that, and what should they be doing?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is, so some of the key states that you want to look for is going to be Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. Those are most definitely states that we have to win in 2022. So what you can do as a voter or as an American is, if you don't live in one of those states, reach out to those GOP parties within those states and find out what you can do from a volunteer perspective. Far too often, people refrain from engaging themselves in certain campaigns because they automatically think, well, I don't have any money to contribute to the campaign. And although monetary contributions are certainly critical to any campaign, boots on the ground or any type of volunteer work, whether it's making phone calls, sending out emails, managing distribution lists, all of that is required to run an effective campaign. And so what I say is, you and we all can get involved in those key states by simply allowing ourselves to reaching out and volunteering for those campaigns. Now, obviously, from a monetary perspective, those campaigns still need money to run any campaign. So if you are in a position to contribute to those campaigns, it's absolutely critical that you do so, but you don't have to have money to do that. So I always use the analogy that in order for us to win in 2022, it has to be a nationwide support for those candidates in those key states, the same as what we saw with Donald Trump. So with Donald Trump, we saw parades, we saw an entire country get behind him, and that's what we need to do in 2022. Whether those candidates have been identified yet, or whether they are still to be announced, who's going to be the front runner for the GOP in those states, we need to be prepared to get behind those candidates and support them, just as we did President Trump throughout the 2020 campaign. But there's a number of things that you can do, especially in those key states that we have to win.
So I have a question here from Janet. Janet, she said, Preston, when you live in a blue state and email the mayor and legislators, do they take it into consideration when it goes against their narrative? If not, what can we do in that case?
That's a difficult question to answer. Do they take it into consideration? I would like to think that they would, simply because they are not mayors or state legislators just for Democrats. They represent all individuals in that particular town, city, or state. But I would like to think they do. Probably the reality is, in most cases, no, they're politicians and they probably delete the emails as it comes through. It all depends on what state you're in. If you want to take it to a next level and you want to reach out to your state representatives or your senators in those states and see if you can get a response from them. There's also been a tremendous amount of success through any type of petition. So if you get, we've seen it in California, if nothing else, we've seen a petition grow leaps and bounds as it relates to Newsom. But really pull together a community, and it's obviously different if it's for a mayor you're communicating with or a governor. That's going to be different. But pull together the community, create a petition, and get focus on whatever it is that you're trying to communicate. Get support. Kind of run your own campaign to communicate whatever it is that you're trying to communicate with those individuals who may not be responding back to you. And always do so peacefully.
Another question is, what can we do to ensure our elections aren't stolen from here going forward?
That's a really good question. So what can we do? Absolutely nothing. When I say we, I mean those of us who are not in a position of legal authority. There's absolutely nothing that we can do other than trust that those individuals who are in a position of legal authority are doing the right thing. And that's a very difficult thing to do, especially following 2020 elections. I recognize that and certainly respect that there is a huge lack of voter confidence. But us as voters, there's nothing we can do besides go to the polls and vote. However, we need to rebuild our confidence and understand that when we see things taking place like what we've seen in Georgia, what we are currently seeing in Arizona, those are all put into place to enact legislation to ensure that election integrity is there moving forward. It isn't there to overturn any election results. It isn't there to bring Donald Trump back, as hard as it is for people to hear that. That's not why those things are taking place. Those things are taking place to ensure that we have election integrity moving forward. So, it's cliche. It's tough to say trust the system. I don't say necessarily trust the system, but trust that the legislators that are fighting for election integrity are going to make sure that is in place for the 2022 elections and subsequently the 2024 elections.
Susan made a good point. She said, thank God here in PA we had an election in March which limits the governor's emergency powers. He must work with the assembly, which is how it should have been, functioning all along with all of these mandates, the restrictions, COVID lockdowns, all that stuff. It should have followed the chain of command that it was supposed to be following in regards to going through the House within each state and then approving by the Senate and then going to the governor's desk. Governors used executive orders, which was restricting a lot of people's freedoms during this time. And that's what so many people are fighting for. But I have a question here from Colleen Fletcher. She said, Preston, what can we do when the CDC doesn't have the authority, but allows freeloaders to stay in their house for free? Yet we have to pay the mortgage, insurance, and taxes. Now Biden went against the Supreme Court order and issued an extension. It is not big corporations owning the rental houses. We need income for our retirement. What can we do? Separation of powers. Why isn't the Supreme Court saying something? And why aren't they enacting the law that was passed?
So you broke up a little bit on the first part of the question, but I think that the overall question is, why is the Supreme Court not taking issue or not even taking up the issue on the power or on the actual legislation?
Yeah, so for me, and
like
kind
the
of
overreach of power?
Yeah, so to kind of exemplify the question is, why is it the fact that our Supreme Court isn't delegating the laws of the land, but more of our Department of Justice designating which laws are and aren't? And why is the CDC overreaching in their authority and their power to enact things that the American citizens didn't vote for?
So look, I can't answer that question. I do not know why the CDC is even involved in that conversation. I too myself have the same question. What I can say is right now, the CDC has a tremendous amount of political influence, unfortunately, throughout Washington and even outside of Washington. When you look at on a state level, the CDC is pretty much the voice of reason when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that I like to think that's probably where they get their power from. But I'm not really sure why the CDC was even involved in that conversation.
How do they even have the power is my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't have the answer to that. That's a really good question. But I'm not entirely sure.
And Preston, I think, you live in multiple different places, but one of the places that you visit frequently is Florida. And what is your thoughts on DeSantis and Joe Biden and their clapbacks to each other? What is your thought process of what do you feel about that?
I feel nothing but pure joy. I think that DeSantis's clapback to Joe Biden yesterday was absolutely phenomenal. And it was very much reminiscent of some of Donald Trump's clapbacks, even the hand gestures. I think that DeSantis did an exceptional job at proving his point, right? And if you notice, he was using his hands in a very unique way. So look, DeSantis is standing up for the people of Florida, and he's basically telling Joe Biden, get the hell out of my way. You're not going to come into my state, and you're not going to try to overrule state government with your federal powers. And I absolutely support Governor DeSantis on literally every single thing that he has done from a policy perspective. And I think that what's interesting about DeSantis is he's very much, he communicates in a lot the same way that Donald Trump did and still continues to do. But he does it with a little bit less emotion. And that's why I think DeSantis is incredibly impactful in his clapbacks and his statements. But yeah, I mean, look, I think that I agree with DeSantis 100%. We need to look at the border. And DeSantis closed his comments with saying, until I didn't want to hear about COVID-19 and the Delta variant. And so you do something about the southern border. And that, I think a lot of us are feeling that way. Joe Biden has literally is destroying this country with what's taking place at the southern border, and no one is addressing it. So I'm in full favor. I have not heard. I heard Biden did a clapback earlier today. Fortunately, I was on a flight. I've not heard what clapback was.
Yeah, he said something like, "Who was that?" He was like, "Who was that?" Like, he doesn't even know where he is half the time. So like,
he probably literally did not know who Governor DeSantis was. That's why he said, "Who is that?" Like, he probably did not remember.
He creepily was signing a bill today, and he was hugging on this little girl, and it was just like my skin crawled. I was like, oh, he's so gross.
Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, that administration is what I call a cartoon administration, and it's full of theatrics. We see it every single day through Psaki's press conferences. We see it in Joe Biden's press conferences, and quite frankly, I don't think that that administration is even worthy of my time to sit down and watch any of their interactions, whether it's a press conference coming from the Oval Office or the press room. Quite frankly, they're not respected. I don't
And I
even
think
give them the time of day.
a lot of this goes into the violation of our Constitution. A lot of what the policies that he's enacting are in violation of our Constitution. And this goes into the next question from Becky. She says, "What can we do to get people out there to let these immigrants know what the Biden administration is all about?" And then Amy asks, "Why aren't Republicans in Congress and Senate not following the Constitution and calling Biden out? Why isn't there more outspoken Republicans in GOP?" It's one thing to just not say anything, but it's speaking louder that they're not saying anything at all.
So, look, what I'll say is, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of Republicans in Congress that do speak out on a consistent basis. Unfortunately, there's only a small percentage of those individuals that get national media coverage. So I want to first start with that. There are also a separate set of Republicans in Congress that they are politicians, and is all they care about are their political gains, meaning they're super donors, and they just want to ride the line. They don't want to trigger the left. They don't want to trigger the right. They don't want to engage in any conflict. They just want to ride out their term until next election, and that's what we call career politicians, and that's why I support term limits. But I do think that there are a lot of individuals in Congress that are calling out not only the Biden administration, but also the overreach of power of Nancy Pelosi and her ridiculous mask mandates, if you will, or threatening them that she's going to fine them, threatening even the workers in the Capitol building that she's going to have them arrested if they don't wear a mask. Many of those individuals have come out, Republicans have come out and condemned her for that. So I think that there is a tremendous amount of vocalism in Congress amongst Republicans. Unfortunately, it just all doesn't get national attention. And then you have some that are just asleep.
Right. So,
Romney being one of them.
Right. The next question I have is from Michelle Frost. She says, "How does he feel about the kids having to wear masks going back to school?"
Look, I think that's a parent's choice. I don't think that anyone should be forced to wear, and no governing body should ever force a parent to place a mask on their kid. It's not up to the governing body. It's up to the parent. When we start to go down that road of the government telling parents what to do, such as masking up their kids or requiring them to mask up their kids, we're leading ourselves down a very dangerous path that could ultimately result in some place that none of us want to be. So that should be a parental decision. That's what's the government going to do next? Tell parents that their kids can only watch a certain amount of TV. Tell parents that their kids have to be in school 12 hours a day. There's a number of things that can go wrong with that once the government starts telling parents what to do with their kids under the pandemic or under a state of emergency. So I do not support it at all. I think it's absolutely hideous. And if I was a parent and I was required to send my kid to school with a mask, I would pull my kid from that school immediately and I would homeschool them.
So this next question will get us into a heated topic, which I know you you like to talk about, but
can't wait.
Joe Roberts said Joe Biden signed today was giving gold medals to the police of Washington over January 6th and April 4th. What do you feel? How do you feel about that whole situation surrounding January 6th?
So January 6th is unfortunately a topic that by law I'm not allowed to discuss. And by law, legally, I've been counseled to not discuss January 6th. But here's what I will say. Joe Biden is trying to, I find it very interesting that take January 6th out of it. I find it very interesting that Joe Biden would ever recognize a member of law enforcement of any kind, especially after the past 2 years. I find that interesting. And again, I'm going to go back to it's all theatrics, you guys. It's all a matter of the Biden administration trying to pretend that they are, that they care in general. The Biden administration doesn't give two shits about the Capitol Police or any law enforcement officer in this country. So that's where I'll stop on that, because I don't want to talk any about
Right.
January 6th. But I do think it's all just a matter of theatrics. Joe Biden's going to do whatever he's told to do, in large part by his advisors and Kamala Harris, and that's probably what he was told to do. He probably doesn't even know who he was giving a medal to or for what he was giving it to them for.
Ethan has a question. He says, what do you think on them mandating the shot, for example, our military and our frontline healthcare workers?
So that's concerning, right? I don't believe that any individual should be required to take the vaccine under any circumstance. So when the Department of Justice came out last week and allowed that mandate to take place, specific to federal workers, obviously involving our military, that was saddening. It was very disturbing to see that. So I don't support it. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's any way to prevent it from happening. And that is what's scary, is you cannot say to our military, well, if you don't like it, get a different job, right? They're enlisted. And so it's unfortunate. I think it's a terrible decision, and I would never support a vaccine mandate of any kind under any circumstance, not especially when a vaccine that is still in experimental trials.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. So a lot of things unconstitutional, but the mainstream media and a lot of the headlines, Washington Post, CNN said, Joe Biden's implementing policies that they don't know if they're actually legal or not. What do you think about that? And why are they so openly admitting that they're implementing things that aren't technically legal?
So I haven't read that. I don't think that the Biden administration is implementing policy that they don't know is legal. I think that they like to ride the Constitution very closely, and don't forget there is also a separate set of laws, if you will, that apply under emergency powers. So as you talked about earlier with the states and the state's ability to enact mandate and lockdowns under emergency powers. So I don't think that the Biden administration is doing anything illegal, other than the obvious, allowing the illegal immigrants to continue to flood across the southern border.
Let me read this headline for you. It's straight here from CNN. Straight from CNN, it says, Biden shows he's ready to make drastic moves in COVID-19 fight, even if he's not sure they're legal.
Yeah, I mean, unless it is, Biden made the statement yesterday, I believe it was, in a press conference, and I've not read the article, so I want to be careful with how I respond to it. He does strongly encourage, and he hopes that there is a universal or a nationwide mandate for the vaccine. That obviously that would end up in the courts before that could ever be enacted. It would end up in the courts and ultimately end up in the Supreme Court. But Biden also, the federal government only has certain reach. It stops at the state government. So if he comes out and he spews, well, yeah, I want the entire country to essentially be mandated to be vaccinated rather, and he doesn't really have the power to do that. That's why you have your governor who's protecting you from overreach of the federal government. But that's really what I can think of. CNN, who knows what they're saying? I'm sure it's something in favor of Biden, but that's a rather interesting article for CNN to even put out there, a rather interesting headline.
Right. It's like it was shocking to me. I was like, wait, they're literally saying, like, bad headline. You really have to read into what the actual articles say before you jump to conclusions. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was like, wow, that's a really, really poor choice of what you want to having coming from your news network. But
CNN's all clickbait.
Well, yeah, because their viewership is in the tank and no one's watching them. That's the problem. They want viewers 100%. And no one is watching them. I'm going to ask you one more question from Becky, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. But Becky said, in Australia, the police were tackling people down to the ground and making them get the vaccination. What are your thoughts on that?
I think what's happening in Australia is absolutely terrifying. As far as the videos with the police attacking individuals and forcing, I do not know of any source that actually validated those to be credible videos. I saw some of the same ones just through TikTok and social media, but I've not seen any credible source come out and say that indeed is happening. What I will say is happening in Australia with the lockdowns, and we're talking snap lockdown. So we're not talking, hey, you have 24 hours to lock down, or you have 12 hours to lock down. We're talking about at the end of this press conference, you better be inside of your house and locked down for the next month. So that's the type of lockdowns that we're seeing in Australia right now. And that's I'm 100% against it. Lockdowns, in my opinion, do not work. They didn't work for us in the height of the pandemic. They most certainly aren't going to work with the Delta variant. But as far as them forcing the vaccine, and I've seen those videos, I don't really know if those are credible videos to believe. I think it's rather, if those were actual videos that were credible, then that would be, I would think, a full-on human rights violation, and we would be hearing a lot more of those stories. But I've only seen one video, I think, where that was allegedly happening.
All right. Well, guys, you've asked your questions. Let me see here quickly. A lot of them we're talking about. Colleen said Doe versus Rumsfeld Supreme Court ruled that a military cannot give emergency use of authorization drugs to a military against their will. So that's kind of what the situation we're in right now. So we'll see how it works during this pandemic, if they're actually implementing those or not. Like we just talked about, that you don't think that the government or government body should be able to force someone to do anything that they don't want to do. That's the great thing about our Constitution of the United States of America. But Preston, I want to wrap this up with you, and I thank you so much for having you on the show. It's watching. If you guys aren't following Preston on TikTok, you need to. He has great lives. If you guys want some pure entertainment, you need to make sure you're tuning in and listening to him, because I tune in and listen, I feel like, for hours, because he's on live for like 5 hours at a time. And
I am not. No, that's
it's usually from his car, so this is the normal setting, but he's usually live. But Preston, if you had any words of encouragement for people, what would you say to everyone out there? And then how do they find you, and where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, sorry, I have a lawnmower going by me right now, which is why I prefer to do any type of media inside of a safe space that doesn't have noise restrictions. So on TikTok, it's at HR Preston, just spelled like my first name, but HR, H is in Henry, R is in Robert before that on TikTok. It's what I say is, kind of what I began with, is continuing to stay positive and stay forward thinking and not stay stuck in 2020. I think as patriots, as Republicans, as Trumpers, whatever we want to call ourselves, I prefer to call ourselves Americans, but it's easy for us to stay stuck in 2020, and we've got to let go, because if not, the Democrats are loving every minute of it. We do not have voter confidence moving into 2022. And I can tell you from firsthand knowledge and speaking with strategists on the Democratic side, they're banking on the lack of voter confidence in this country amongst the Republican Party. That is their number one winning strategy for 2022, is that none of Republicans will get out and vote because they do not believe in the system. They do not believe in the integrity of the election laws that's out there, or even the systems that are out there. So we have to stop, collect ourselves, support the candidates for 2022, believe in our legislators that is passing legislation to ensure election integrity, and definitely get out and vote in 2022 without any thoughts back to 2020. So that's my closing words. But most certainly, stay positive. Always remember, we do live in the greatest country in this world, and it is not the end of the world yet. Talk to my mom; she thinks it is, but it's not the end of the world just yet. We have a lot of progress looking forward in the next 2 and most certainly the next 3 years.
Well, thank you so much once again coming on here, Preston. I appreciate it. But guys, make sure you guys are sharing this message out there with all of your friends and family. Get them connected. Our Patreon Zoom members, for everybody who wants is a Patreon member, we're going to be going over there shortly. So make sure you're going over there to join us. But thank you once again, Preston. I appreciate it so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.